Hello and thanks for tuning in. I'm Holly Shields, welcoming you all to another edition of Kalkine TV's Executive Corner Expert Talks. Today we're narrowing in on one very special venture capital firm that's leading the charge in the revolutionary field of psychedelic therapy. Kuma Ventures invests in leading early-stage psychedelic healthcare companies at the forefront of clinical research into illnesses and mental health disorders. The emerging market is set to be massive in scale, which is no surprise as they're doing some incredibly valuable work. And here to shed some light on the space is Sean McLintock, the founding partner of Kuma Ventures. Welcome to the show, Sean. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Holly. I appreciate your time. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Now, first of all, I'd love to know, what's the appeal of the psychedelic therapy market for you as an investor?
For me as an investor, I think it opens up an entirely new paradigm of investment, both within the medical and biopharmaceutical field, but also more generally, I think as society is starting to undo some of the wrongs of the past. For me, I mean, when you look at the total addressable market across multiple indications of which psychedelics can treat, all the way from depression through to post-traumatic stress disorder and other ailments, including pain, and cluster headaches, but also obsessive compulsive disorders, including ADHD, weight, etc., etc. There's a tremendous amount that can be done with psychedelics. There's also a very interesting neuroplasticity angle to it, which means that it can assist with things like dementia, brain damage, and other hemorrhaging. And for us, I think it's really not necessarily seen as a panacea, but we certainly see it as a very helpful tool in the next generation of better treatments for people with mental illness.
Right, that's incredible. Very well said there. I think there is a huge scope of illnesses that can be treated with these new psychedelic therapies, if I'm not incorrect there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people focus very deeply on the depression side of things, on the treatment of anxiety, depression, PTSD, which are incredibly prevalent, and as we know, after COVID, have been exacerbated tremendously. Even before COVID, the European Union said there was a pandemic of mental health, and so there's a large amount of treatment that is needed in that space, particularly because there's been a dearth of investment there for over 50 years. We've not had a new mental health treatment or drug on the market for almost 30 years, at least one that is widely adopted. And I think ultimately we're stuck in the doldrums when it comes to medication for people with mental illness. And we are also a little bit behind on our understanding of mental illness and all of the different indications underneath that. But beyond that, as you rightly point out, psychedelics have tremendous effects on neuroplasticity, which allows the brain to essentially grow back or regrow its neurons, which you can imagine is fantastic for a number of different ailments. But then it also has tremendous anti-inflammatory properties, which can help for everything from cluster headaches to rare forms of epilepsy like Dravet syndrome. And so we're looking at a lot of different things. Some of the most interesting ones you could imagine would be the injection of LSD into an inflamed ocular nerve, as it's shown that LSD has some of the deepest anti-inflammatory properties around. So there's a lot of things going on. Certainly most of the focus is on the mental health aspect, but I certainly seem to see over the next 2 decades, other treatments coming in to treat low-hanging fruits of indications that haven't had effective treatments for a number of years.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, it sounds like you foresee it having a massive impact on the healthcare market.
Yes, I do think so. And when you look at drugs like, the most famous drug of all, I suppose, penicillin. Penicillin inevitably comes from a mushroom. It's an ergot. And so these are really the roots of many of our current medications. And I think what we're exploring now is a whole class of compounds that have previously been outlawed by society, by the war against drugs and politics. And these are now being explored, and we're finding amazing treatments and amazing uses for these drugs and these natural compounds.
That's great to hear. I mean, I don't doubt that there's certainly a lack of education when it comes to these compounds, as you mentioned, certainly, particularly with the natural-based aspect of it. It is certainly something that not the average person is aware of, I think, when it comes to psychedelic health products. And, we know that the liberalization is expanding as we speak, but how exactly is the progress in terms of regulations in the markets you target? I know Europe is a big one.
Europe is a very big one, almost 900 million people. As I said, they declared a mental health pandemic, so governments are on board at looking at new treatments. The UK is also a world leader in terms of R&D in this space, and the US has been leading the regulatory charge, with the FDA really up at front. But I think it's important to delineate these drugs from the social stigma that surrounds them, because unlike, for example, cannabis or other new areas that we're investing in, this is traditionally following the Western medical paradigm, right? We have to go through the same clinical trial hurdles as any other drug does. But unlike modern pharmaceuticals, there is a sort of an additional element to this treatment as well, certainly on the mental health side. So not only is the drug used, but also combination therapies such as psychotherapy and other digital tools as well.
So this sounds like there's a wide range there of possible applications for these products.
Yeah, and when I talk about the Western medical paradigm and the way we have to go through those hoops, when you look at the psychedelic landscape, we've got a number of drugs in phase 3. MDMA, in fact, is in phase 3. Phase 3B, which is their final phase. They'll likely be getting market approval in 2025 for the treatment of PTSD. That's an amazing and a remarkable step forward for what was previously known as a party drug, which has shown over 80% efficacy rates amongst PTSD responders. An unknown fact as well is that the US military has been treating a lot of their PTSD responders coming back from the Afghan and Iraq wars with MDMA for years, with remarkable results. And those are sorts of the things that are really providing a lot of tailwinds for the industry. With regards to regulation in our industry, first, what we need to do is prove market approval for a particular drug to show that it is safe in humans, that it has an effect on the indication that it's trying to treat. And there's a number of other things there. That typically takes us through phase 1, 2, and 3 of a clinical trial, after which a regulatory body such as the FDA in Europe, the MHRA, gives the market approval for the drug to be used for an indication. It is then up to governments to say, okay, we are happy to reschedule this drug, which was previously scheduled to allow for medical use. Now, we've seen Boris Johnson, although a very flamboyant character, come out and say that he is very willing to give rescheduling of psilocybin and a number of other drugs, provided there is market approval. It's very exciting time because these market approvals are not far away. And I think what we'll start to see is a domino effect, particularly in regions like Europe, where governments are looking and desperately need to address what has become a socio-economic problem of mental health.
Well, it's great to hear that these approvals aren't too far away, despite that lengthy process you described with those hurdles. But it sounds like it's just around the corner. Is that fair to say that mainstream use is around the corner?
I wouldn't say it's quite around the corner. There's certainly been a massive proliferation of ketamine clinics. Ketamine has been available off-label for about 35 years. That basically means it can be used to treat a number of different indications, provided it's in a clinical setting and has been prescribed by a nurse practitioner, and you have the relevant GP scripts, etc. In the US, there are thousands of them. In London, there are hundreds around the UK. And people are finding a lot of respite with ketamine for everything from addiction, pain, depression, anxiety. However, these clinics are rarely spoken about. They're not necessarily in the mainstream just yet. We're getting to the point in the US where people are starting to get mass access. We've invested in a company, Journey Clinical, which gives access to people on a digital basis and allows for digital prescription of these drugs, which is certainly helping with access. But it's certainly, I don't think, reached mainstream. We've seen a lot of media outlets like yourself starting to cover this, and I think that's helping a lot. But as I mentioned earlier, the clinical trial process is long. And so with MDMA coming out in 2025, that is going to be really exciting. It's the start of the industry, really, in my eyes. And then we've got hopefully psilocybin following, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, with Compass Pathways getting market approval, hopefully in sometime 2027 or 2028. And by that time, we'll really start to have these treatments available to patients in certain countries, collecting data, valuable data that will help the regulators get more comfortable, but will also help the industry start to become more efficient and scale more rapidly. So it's around the corner, depending on your time horizon.
Right. Well, it certainly is very exciting there, and sounds like we've got a lot to look forward to in the coming years from the industry as it expands and professionalizes. And we are seeing, I suppose, a renaissance, you could say, of the psychedelic health market at the moment. So that is, of course, great to hear. You did mention it just before, I believe, about some of the companies that you've invested in. Could you maybe shed some light for us on Kuma's current portfolio?
Absolutely. I think it's first important for us to kind of delineate the ecosystem into what there are a number of different buckets, but we focus on three main buckets within the sector. The first bucket really being clinical trials and R&D. These are your typical biotechnology companies or life sciences companies. We've invested most heavily in those. We've focused on companies looking at creating new chemical entities, companies looking at creating novel IP that has long-term value. And a number of our most exciting investments have listed on the NASDAQ, one of which is Atai Life Sciences. They listed on the NASDAQ last year. And then we've got Bright Minds Biosciences, which is also listed on the NASDAQ. Bright Minds is incredibly exciting. They're a small Canadian outfit, but they're focused on treating the low-hanging fruit I was talking about, the cluster headaches, Dravet syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorders. And they've arguably got one of the widest libraries in the space. And I absolutely love the team. Beckley SciTech, a UK stalwart and an absolute love of ours. Beckley is focused on using 5-MeO-DMT, which is known as the toad in colloquial terms. And that's an extract from a particular toad, which has a very strong and short-acting psychedelic effect, but has tremendous healing properties because of that. We've then also looked at a number of different compounds, and Small Pharma is leading the way in DMT. They have listed as well. They're a UK-based company. Elucis as well has just announced a SPAC. They were one of the first companies in the space, and we've really enjoyed backing Shlomi. But then what gets quite exciting for us as well is when we start to look at the infrastructure that's required to create this psychedelic assisted therapy paradigm, this new shift in mental health care. And for that, you need enabling technologies, and you need the ability to better understand patients and patient needs, right? I think one of the biggest problems in mental health is that we have these very one-size-fits-all approach. We don't really have patient phenotyping. We don't understand the subtypes of depression, and we don't really listen to our patients. We just prescribe. And so we've looked very closely at how we address that. Monument Therapeutics, which is a spin out of Cambridge Cognition, is looking at developing digital biomarkers, which can help people understand which drugs are best for them, how they're responding to certain drugs. And that really aids drug developers trying to create the right drugs for the right people. Because a fun fact, only 30% of SSRIs, antidepressants, work on people they're prescribed to. And I think, more than looking at what we should be giving people, I think we should also be looking at what we shouldn't be giving people. And Monument's quite amazing at that. And then obviously I mentioned Journey Clinical earlier, one of our favorite companies. They're providing a digital care solution in the US, basically allowing people access in small towns and rural areas to these sorts of treatments through their digital platforms, which really helps with obviously getting the treatments out there. And I can go on and on. We've invested in a number of other companies which provide experiential services. For example, Trip is an amazing VR company. They provide psychedelic treatments via VR, but also have a huge training, integration and preparation arm. And then we've got Wave Paths, who have designed experiential music, particularly for psychedelic experiences. So that music will work together with your experience to maximize your outcome. Music is an incredibly important part of the set and setting of a psychedelic experience. And then we also have Awaken, which is a a group of clinics in the UK and Norway. They also have a number of very exciting new drugs that they're bringing to market on the ketamine and MDMA side. And then I think lastly, Sana Health is a really fantastic company that we've looked at for a number. We've really enjoyed engaging with Richard, and he's just received breakthrough status for fibromyalgia. It's the first breakthrough status afforded to a hardware product, so for fibromyalgia. So we're really excited about that. And he's working with a number of amazing stakeholders to further access to pain relieving medication through digital services. So that just about wraps everything up. There are one or two that I might have missed, but I don't know if we have time for that. And ultimately what we're trying to do here is, what you can see is, develop an ecosystem whereby these companies can support each other. They have services that are mutually beneficial, and also they each touch different aspects of the ecosystem, which allows us to build a pretty comprehensive view of how things are going to go in the future.
That's phenomenal to hear. It sounds like they're doing some very incredible work with all these unmet needs that you're referring to. It's quite shocking to hear some of that, actually. And it sounds like as well they're doing a lot of work with medtech and telehealth to address these issues, which is, I think, very necessary there. They are doing some phenomenal work. It sounds like you have a great portfolio under your wing there, and you're doing some great work with this ecosystem and helping to build it up and create it. It must be, I must say, incredible to advance the growth of these industry pioneers side by side.
It's been incredible. If we look at the past 3 years, I believe the first year we began in psychedelics, there was $60 million of investment. The next year there was $2 billion of investment. And I would be very interested to see what the figures are for 2022. There is a lot of money pouring into the space. And I think that's largely due to the recognition, not only by governments, but also by people and by society, that mental health is a very serious problem. We don't have the right solutions for it, and we desperately need to address that.
I think you're quite right there, definitely on the money. Is there anything else we can look forward to seeing from Neo Kuma in the 2022 period?
Certainly, I think we've got a lot to look forward to every day. I wish there were 25-hour days, Holly. But no, I think for us, we've got a lot of very exciting clinical inflection points coming up. We've got a number of our companies starting to report on trials that have been ongoing. And I think the results of those trials are going to be very beneficial in helping us craft an even deeper narrative for the success of these treatments. And then we've also got, of course, a lot of M&A happening in the space. One of the and also investment in the space from very traditional biotech investors. So that is what's really making me excited. We're seeing the likes of ARK Fund, Kathy Wood, investing in one of our portfolio companies, Atai. That is a huge recognition of mainstream adoption of this type of therapy. And also we're hoping that more of that comes in. Not only Kathy and ARK, but a number of the other funds start to look at this in a very serious nature, and psychedelic companies are added to public ETFs. But also that the private ecosystem is supported by more traditional medtech, biotech, and life sciences funds, because psychedelics is a wonderful beachhead for a number of other issues. So, where something might be trialed in psychedelics, it certainly has application far beyond that. And, I'm quite excited to see how the rest of the general funding architecture starts to rally around that.
Absolutely. And, I'll have no doubt that we'll see some of that stuff that you mentioned in the next few years as the industry does develop and expand. And particularly everything that you have going on this year. It sounds like you have your hands quite full there with a lot of exciting developments in the space. It's very promising and a very good position to be in, I must say.
Thank you. It was always daunting being at the front, leading a charge, but we're trying to do it in the most responsible and effective way possible and get these treatments to people as soon as they can.
Well, it's great to hear you are doing a very excellent job so far, if I do say so myself there. But apart from that, it's been really great to hear from you today, Sean. Thanks very much for joining us on Executive Corner Expert Talks.
Thank you, Holly. All the best.
Pleasure to have you on. Thanks for your time as well, viewers. If you've just joined us, that was Sean McLintock of Kuma Ventures. They're doing some incredible work in the space, so keep an eye out. And as we say here, stay apprised and invest wise with Kalkine. I'm Holly Shields with Kalkine Media.